Right, well, joining us now, because we do have some more breaking news, is our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher.
Hi, Nana. Yeah, I got some breaking news moments ago. Now, we are now told by sources that the PM and Morgan McSweeney decided it was the right moment to move on together. So it wasn't just the choice made by Morgan McSweeney. We're led to believe the government's policy agenda has not changed. There's a relentless focus, as they say, on cost of living and a determination to deliver a more prosperous country based on providing opportunity, security and respect for all will continue. The PM, Sir Keir Starmer, recognises the need for government to address the issues highlighted by these Mandelson revelations. The commitment to economic strategy, that isn't changing either. They say it's led to falling inflation and lower interest rates unchanged. Work began last week on all this, number 10 sources tell us. And the PM has now instructed officials to move at pace, they say, to deliver change. And he hopes to deliver that to update the country as early as tomorrow. So it looks like we'll be hearing from the Prime Minister tomorrow to set out what happens next. This is a huge moment for this Prime Minister. He'll be, it looks like, addressing the country as soon as tomorrow. There'll be questions from the press there. I hope to be there for GB News. The question will be simply asked, why are you still there when Morgan McSweeney isn't? Because surely that appointment of Lord Mandelson was made by you, Prime Minister, not by Morgan McSweeney. And in fact, if you read the statement from Morgan McSweeney, he says, doesn't he? If asked, he said, hire Peter Mandelson. Now, who else was asked? And in fact, as ever, advisors advise, but politicians decide. Now, the question I'm thinking here is, why is the PM still in post if Morgan McSweeney feels he should resign? Someone had to go. He had to go for the appointment of Peter Mandelson. Why is the PM still in his position? The problem here for the PM is he's lost his political fireguard, his political brains, someone who shielded him, I think, from so much of the political world that I don't think the PM really fully understood, certainly the way I've seen him in the past 18 months or so as Prime Minister. He needs it more than ever, going to a difficult by-election in 2.5 weeks and difficult local elections and devolving administration elections in May. Also, who else will go? Will these documents released by the government, the high tens of thousands of vetting documents, who will they show gave advice to hire Lord Mandelson? And should they go too? What did, for example, Jonathan Powell say, the PM's advisor who's been behind the passing of the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius at the cost of tens of billions of pounds of our money? Has that happened? And if so, what did he say? Was he against his appointment or in favour of it? Very, very interesting. Also, I'm puzzled by the fact that Pat McFadden said on his morning interview rounds this morning on television that Morgan McSweeney should stay. It wasn't the time to sack him, he said. What changed in the past 3 or 4 hours? Why is his position suddenly completely untenable? And why couldn't Morgan McSweeney hang on for a few days for someone else to replace him, make it look orderly rather than panicked? Because this looks panicked. The PM is in real trouble here, real peril. We could be hearing from him as soon as tomorrow.
Well, Christopher, when you said that they've decided to go together for a moment, I thought you meant both of them were leaving together. But I get it. They made a joint decision that Morgan McSweeney would leave rather than Morgan McSweeney just saying, I'm going to resign.
The reason why that matters, Nana, is because if you're in charge, why wasn't Morgan McSweeney frankly sacked over this? Why is the PM allowing himself to be led, it seems, by other people's choices? The point about being Prime Minister is you're in charge. The buck stops with you. Why hasn't he gone? That is what I find puzzling, maybe a bit difficult to fathom here. The PM had to step in and make a choice, didn't make it, and Morgan McSweeney resigned. Now, what Number 10 are briefing us now as on guidance is that it was a decision made by both Morgan McSweeney and the Prime Minister. So clearly they sat down for a conversation in the wake of quite brutal series of interviews on the Sunday morning breakfast shows this morning, and said, look, we've got to find a way out of this, and it probably isn't me being part of it. But he allowed him to resign rather than be sacked. But if you want to show authority, want to show that you're in charge to the rest of the Labour Party, and maybe this wasn't the way to go about it.
Well, maybe he was afraid of what that could do if he did that, because Morgan McSweeney must have contacts all over, and Morgan McSweeney knows where all the bodies are buried. So he's obviously got to sort of keep some sort of good relationship with him, and I suspect having a discussion and deciding was probably the best way for him to do that. Do we have any idea who he might put in Morgan McSweeney's place?
We don't. Now, there's already some speculation about who might replace him. The peer who did the work on the grooming gangs inquiry, Baroness Louise Casey, she's been raised as somebody who possibly could go into that role. She was also mooted as someone who could replace Chris Wormold, who was the cabinet secretary as recently as last November. So I know Louise Casey pretty well. I mean, she is someone who can definitely push through an agenda, often against opposition from within Whitehall. She can definitely deliver on what the PM's agenda is, and that could be an option. I mean, Louise Casey's got her own issues at the moment. Of course, she's helping to get this grooming gangs inquiry started up by April this year. She's also, rather importantly, reviewing the issue of social care and how we're going to fund that. And that was a kind of a big picture, a big piece of thinking now for the Prime Minister. She's doing that at the same time. Meetings have already started on that last September. That work is underway. So an early favourite for this role is Baroness Louise Casey. But I say again, if you didn't want to give off an air of panic, because that's what it looks like, they should really have announced the new chief of staff at the same time as Morgan McSweeney moves on. That hasn't happened. It clearly was a conversation between Morgan McSweeney and Sir Keir Starmer, and they both agreed that he should go, but no one currently replaces him, and that leaves this government rudderless.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade, and in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver, and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
And a very bad look, because it's not one but two. He lost Sue Gray at the beginning, and now Morgan McSweeney. It's a terrible look for the Prime Minister.
Yes, that's a very good point, Nana. I mean, Sue Gray, of course, was appointed, I think, November 23, I think, from memory, and she was brought in to give the team around Sir Keir Starmer experience of government, someone who could establish how to hit the ground running. She was blamed by people for not having that preparation ready when they won the election in July 24, and she quit, of course, I think October 2024, and now we find that in February 26, another chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, who replaced Sue Gray, he's gone too. It just shows how hard it is, maybe, given the challenges facing this country, given the fact that that growth is anemic or barely anything at all. It's very hard, maybe, to get a grip on what you want to do as a Labour government. What he wants to talk about, the Prime Minister, is cost of living. He's got a whole suite of things which are happening this year they want to talk about to show how this government is delivering for those on the lowest incomes. Instead, he's talking about an odious character called Jeffrey Epstein, how our former ambassador helped him when he was in government, and associated with him after that in his private life, and how difficult that is for the government to understand, and how awful that looks for women supporting Labour, for men too. I mean, a complete disaster, an awful look for a Prime Minister who did come into politics for public service. He favours and talks about public service all the time. I think he is lacking in some of the political skills required in the most important job in politics in this country. And Morgan McSweeney was that right-hand man. I mean, I was looking back just now at what the PM said about Morgan McSweeney as recently as last Wednesday. He said there the importance of him to his team. He said that he was central to the operation. He helped him win elections, and now he's gone. I mean, a complete disaster, I think, for the Prime Minister. He was, he's tied himself to the mast of Morgan McSweeney, and now he's lost his key person who was so important to him over the past 6 years. Really, all of his time at the front line of politics, Morgan McSweeney has been there with him, and now he's gone.
I can remember talking to you last week and saying that when Keir Starmer says he's got absolute confidence in someone, that person disappears. And he did exactly that, and Morgan McSweeney is next.
Well, I think to be fair to the Prime Minister, I mean, we only ask if a PM has confidence in somebody when that person is already in some trouble. So I don't think you can necessarily make that connection. I think, if someone was doing well in their jobs, they wouldn't be on the way if the PM said they have confidence. But yeah, no question, this is a really difficult moment here for the Prime Minister. Again, as I say, to reiterate, we think we're going to be hearing from the Prime Minister as soon as tomorrow. We're not hearing from him today. Again, the PM and Morgan McSweeney decided it was the right moment to move on together. The government is making clear that its agenda has not changed. A relentless focus, they say, on cost of living crisis and a determination to deliver a more prosperous country based on providing opportunity, security and respect for all. That means that the attempt to take on the argument with Reform UK, which has angered some on the left of Labour, will carry on. And this commitment, they say, to its economic strategy, so far delivered falling inflation and lower interest rates, that won't change either. So there'll be no change in economic policy that Rachel Reeves is pursuing, and nothing about the attack on Reform UK, despite the concerns from the left of the Labour Party, as I say. But he recognises the need to do this, to highlight the issues and address them at pace in the back end of these Mandelson revelations. Work started last week, and the PM has told officials at pace to deliver change. And he's hoping to deliver an update, as we say, to update the country, us all, on GB News as early as tomorrow. So nothing from the PM tonight, but maybe tomorrow. And boy, there'll be a vital press conference or a vital speech from the PM to reset how we can all have confidence in him to carry on.
Wow. Phase 3, I think, or 4. I'm not sure where we are.
3 or 4, yeah.
Christopher Hope, thank you very much. He's GB News' political editor. Wow. Joining me now to discuss the breaking news is Director for Popular Conservatism, Mark Littlewood. Mark, so Kemi's forensic questioning ended up forcing a straight answer from Keir Starmer, which was a shocker in itself, which I think was partly why people sighed. But the other part was that he was admitting that he knew information, that he was admitting that he knew things, and perhaps by admitting that, this was a bad thing because he gave Peter Mandelson a job. Where do you sit with what's happened?
Oh, I think we're well into the end game now, Nana. I was listening to your panel a while ago saying that Keir Starmer surviving into next year might be underpriced. I disagree. I think political sentence of death has now been passed, and it's only a question of when exactly the execution takes place. You're right that Kemi's superb performance at PMQs was a trigger for all of this unravelling. And indeed, it forced through Keir Starmer's, I think, fastest U-turn of his government so far. He initially wanted number 10 to decide what information about the vetting would be put into the public domain. 2 hours later, he was forced to accept that it would be the Intelligence and Security Committee. With McSweeney going this afternoon, Starmer's last human shield has now been removed. We heard from Chris Hope a moment ago that it was a joint decision between the two of them. But have a look at Morgan McSweeney's resignation letter. There's one sentence in it which I think if Keir Starmer didn't draft, he should certainly read. It says, when asked, I advised the Prime Minister to make that appointment and I take full responsibility for that advice, says McSweeney. In public life, responsibility must be owned when it matters most, not just when it is most convenient. In the circumstances, the only honourable course is to step aside. Well, if they decided that McSweeney had to step aside for offering advice, presumably the Prime Minister has to step aside for following that advice. I can't see anything, really, in the next 24 hours, 72 hours, or 72 days that is likely to get better for the Prime Minister. And you can see an awful lot that's going to get worse. This is a classic example of the end of days of a government. A few loyalists like Lord McCabe, who we just heard from, loyally try and put up some form of defence, but more and more MPs break for cover, demanding a change. We've heard more voices of that ilk today. A lot of them are doing that behind closed doors. This is the end of days for the Starmer regime. I think the chance that he resigns in the next few days, certainly the next few weeks, is significantly underpriced. I think it's very unlikely he'll still be the Prime Minister by the summer.
Well, some people might say that the Tory party, they were pretty bad with this. Remember their last sort of couple of years in office? How many leaders did they have? It's not great, is it?
It's a disaster, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's what led to the Conservative Party's worst ever election defeat in July 2024. The intriguing thing here, and why I think this sleaze scandal and corruption is so horrifically bad for Keir Starmer, possibly even worse than it was for the Conservative Party, is Labour didn't really say very much at the next election about what it was going to change. The word change appeared everywhere, but what kind of change wasn't really spelled out, apart from perhaps in two areas. One was that there was going to be a wholly new approach to public service. Ethics were going to be practiced throughout public life. Sleaze would be ended. All people in authority would be completely committed to public service. We were going to be bathed in virtue as the British electorate. That was a key plank. Well, I mean, this is worse, this scandal, than anything that afflicted the Conservative Party. And one of the principal things that Starmer stood on was to clean up public life. The second key thing was real concern about the way women were treated in public life and more generally. And yet knowing that Peter Mandelson was a known associate of the world's most renowned paedophile and an abuser of young women didn't seem to have entered sufficiently into their consideration before giving him the most senior diplomatic job at the Prime Minister's disposal. So two of the things that they did make plain that they were going to stand on and that were going to change and were going to be different have got worse, even worse than the dying end of the Conservative regime on their watch. That's extraordinary. And I think in the case of the Prime Minister, unsurvivable.
Well, some of them are arguing and they're saying that they chose the person that they believed would be the most efficient against Donald Trump. So they chose him because they thought he'd be the right person to negotiate with Donald Trump. I'm not sure why, but that was the reasoning that they gave. Can you see that at all?
Well, I mean, they put that in the balance, evidently. But in that case, I think that they should have said, our great priority as the incoming government is going to be close relationships with the US administration. That's our top priority. Not vanquishing sleaze, not a better code of ethics in private life. Well, those things might weigh with us, but they'll only weigh with us a bit. The main thing is that we have a very good relationship with the US administration. And if sleaze and corruption has to be tolerated in order to achieve that, that's a bullet that we will bite on. But that's not what they said. That's never what they've said. So you can only judge these people, I think, in accordance to the promises and the undertakings and the trajectory of travel that they promised to set us on. And it wasn't that. It wasn't that the top priority was to make sure that we had a very close relationship with the Trump regime and that if people had a bad backstory, you might have to wear that in order to grease some palms over in Washington. That wasn't their case at all. So their claim to have cleaned up public life lies in complete tatters. And as I say, that was their principal claim. If they wanted to say our geopolitical positioning is so important that the treatment of women and girls by Jeffrey Epstein or the previous career or present allegations against Peter Mandelson do not weigh with us heavily, well, they should have said that. But that's not what they said, and they still haven't said it to this day. Even though I think one can infer that is the truth behind the decisions they took.
Mark Littlewood, thank you very much. He's the Director of Popular Conservatism. Thank you.